Welcome. Introduce yourself.
I'm Mike Ziegler. I am director of a club in Madison. I also I'm a middle school teacher. Do you want me to talk to you or the camera?
Either one.
Okay. But yeah, I guess I've been living in Beaver Dam for about 3-4 years. Got a wife and a daughter.
Nice. Which I know both. Or Kelsey, I haven't met the daughter yet.
Yeah.
So how did you first get involved with CVA and get into directing the whole club? Because obviously that's a big kind of position.
I coached for, I think it was about 10 years. 2 small clubs in the area, and then there was a lot of need for like a lot of different things to kind of change in the club from parents, and they came to me and asked me, like what I could do about that as a coach, and I said, well, there's virtually nothing I can do. I can bring those to my director's attention, and depending on their needs and wants, they could either do them or they could just kind of push me aside and say, okay, well, we're going to do what we're going to do. So I went to a club in town that I had heard of and was very popular on the girls' side, and said, hey, do you want to start a boys program? Because I'd be interested in helping you with that. I know a lot of kids that are interested in this, and I'd help out, start coaching. And then I think I coached for 5 years just at CVA before I said, hey, I'm just interested in making more money, and I need to make more money because I want to buy a house and,
so there was a financial and kind of like volleyball and financial decision mixed together.
For sure.
So is there, with your story there, it didn't seem like you kind of went totally in school. This was your thought all like throughout school. So if someone's going towards that route, maybe coach, wanted to be up in a director, like that kind of position, is there any specific schooling you think would be required, or you would maybe push towards?
I think if I were going to school for something like this, I think some of the courses or some of the areas I would probably suggest would be obviously some basic financial classes, because if you're going to end up looking at the numbers and crunching about what you can charge versus what jerseys that people are able to do. I think that would be important, but also just marketing would be huge, because marketing is so difficult in small sports especially, but also just private sports, because it's not already something that they hear out of school. It's like they have to go out and find your business. So website, possibly, design, things like that.
It's good. I'm in a marketing class right now, so
it's good. That should help, because that was actually really tough trying to get it out there.
Especially because I want to get into the boys volleyball aspect, so it's so small right now. I feel like, because I kind of went into marketing in this area. I went into marketing to see, like, I want to grow the game, like see how we can grow the game and get it for everyone to play. So what would a typical day look like, either at practice, dealing with logistics, or maybe phone calls or emails?
Usually you get probably 2-3. I mean, in a program with 4 teams, which is pretty small considering our girls. For the boys side, I probably got about 2 to 3 emails a day from parents or kids, just usually asking basic logistical questions like what's the practice schedule look like, even though it's posted online, just kind of reteaching where that stuff is. And then other ones would be just schedules, making those work between their home schedules, not being able to make practice, things like that. Just basic communications, but so that would be like pre-practice, and then you get there about 30-35 minutes before, start setting up, making sure other coaches have practice plans. You write those in most clubs. Some clubs, each coach makes their own, but I found that those are a little tough to make sure quality control's there. A lot of times you get newer kids or younger kids coaching that might have had one coach, maybe 2 coaches to compare to, and they use basically what they're used to. So making practice plans, making sure they know what your drills are talking about, because the same lingo does not go from coach to coach. That actually does add up quite a bit. And then from that point, at practice you set up nets, things like that, and at practice you're usually making a couple adjustments. Talking to parents who came in, asking questions that they, didn't
that is the unique part. I think CVA does a lot more, is that the parents actually come in to watch the practice. I think that's an interesting aspect.
On the girls' side, they don't, but on the guys' side.
On the guys' side.
Yeah.
All right. So then, I think you glossed over some of them there, but what are the biggest challenges you face, kind of day to day?
Day to day is just trying to make sure that you're pushing the kids to a higher level. Knowing where they're at is already tough enough, because you only get to see them twice a week. I think is one thing about club that is tough. Sometimes 3, depending on what your program
Like a
offers.
tournament.
Yeah,
Tournament
or you
day.
get like I know the girls always have a third like training day possibly, but you're not all the same coaches are there. So just pushing them. You said challenges and what?
Just biggest challenge that was day to day, and then biggest challenges because the season is obviously longer than it's longer than the school season. It's during the winter, so
sure.
there are challenges in the long term facing the whole season.
Yeah. Just predicting what you're going to see next year. So before tryouts come, you have to already have coaches in place.
Yeah.
Good clubs do that. And if you have extra coaches in place, the better. But then trying to find places for those coaches to go and fit without obviously charging more, because you want to give them a fixed cost and you have no idea what it's really going to cost.
Yeah.
So predicting that is probably the hardest thing.
All right. And then what is your favorite aspect of the job? This could be either day to day or however, like the 5 years you've been doing it.
Yeah, I think it depends on like your involvement with the kids, and depending on when I first started coaching, it was a part of really just being a part of the game, being involved, and just being in the practice. And then eventually, I think my favorite part was like having some kids come back and coach for us. Like that was pretty cool with Keegan. Keegan actually this last year has been asking me if he can come back a little bit.
Nice.
It's kind of crazy, and actually I've been playing against a lot of kids now that and some other people, so that's kind of fun. Just
seeing them grow,
and just having them go to different schools, coming back, and just even sometimes they play at practice with our kids at scrimmaging. So that's been some of the best parts, probably.
All right. And then, was that a solid career, like a standalone career, do you think? Or do you also need another job going along with that or something on the side?
At the level I was at, for sure, it was just a part-time job. Mark and I kind of split duties, and since he had the larger group, he obviously could use that as probably like 70% of his income or so. But for me, it's just probably, I'd say about 10%.
Are there directors out there going full-time and just doing the whole thing on their own?
Yeah, for sure. I think like in Milwaukee, there's 2 or 3 of them that do that.
MVC is really, like MVC and Sting have been getting really big.
Sting's gotten really big with their girls program. MVC for boys is pretty big, but overall it's not that large of a club in comparison. I mean, Sting was able to afford that Kohl's warehouse and expand it that way. Have you been down there since?
I think
Just played there
not.
a year or two
I don't
ago?
think I have.
So they have like a weight room facility in there. So I mean, being able to use that as also some of their income, because they actually charge for like lessons like larger than that.
People that may not even be with the club.
Yeah, sometimes they do strength conditioning and they hire people outside of the sport. So it's a little different. You can expand that way.
Nice. And then, how often is CDA hiring either new coaches or just new staff?
Constantly. There was a couple of years where it was like we had, I'll say it was my second or third year there. A lot of our coaches were about my age, and most of them were going to be professional coaches. Like that's what they were doing, is kind of getting started in that. And about 10 or 15, they're all listed on the website, have gone and they're coaching at D1, 2, 3 NAIA schools, and they're all gone. I mean, they kind of left, and then new crops came in, and it's kind of it happens still quite a bit. But I think that first crop of coaches that they kind of recruited were like right at the perfect age, right at the right time. And then once a lot of people leave, then you're kind of filling in holes when you need it. So starting a club sometimes is the best, because it's you saying, hey, like we want to start it, and here's what I want to do, and you're my top 3 or 5 or wherever you're getting them. And you kind of wait to start your club once you get them. Once you have it, you're expected to always have coaches at every level then. So like this year, there was 3 coaches that decided that they weren't interested in coming back. So filling a year of 3 coaches when you only have 4 teams is really difficult. And trying to keep quality up is even harder, because you don't know sometimes the coaches you're going to get. So you don't want to just give them a team and trust them to
see what
keep the quality up. So it's hard to train coaches too.
That kind of was going into the next question of, is there any is it like internships the way you do it, or is it just straight you hire them, go through a training process, or is it on the job, you're telling them what you want?
Yeah, so there's not like a strict policy like you would think. Like in teaching, it's kind of similar. Like they hire you and they say, okay, well, we trust you this far, and we'll check in on you here and there and see what you need. But You have one meeting every month. That's what teaching does. It's kind of similar. I always try to hire younger kids that come in and help out as like an assistant. And you obviously don't need to pay them a full salary of a coach, but you usually try to keep them with pay. Otherwise, they feel like, well, I'm not getting paid. I can either show up or not show up, and then they usually don't take it seriously. So giving them some incentive to be there, and that's kind of the training that we tried to do. But again, after about 2-3 years, people kind of switch over and sometimes move, especially like college age, because you got multiple homes and you're moving a lot. So
lots of stuff going on.
That's tough.
So then, what were the benefits for you personally working as a director for CBA?
All the benefits is probably meeting a ton of, families and people in the area that play volleyball.
Yeah.
There's not a day where I go to a tournament and I don't know about 90% of the people there.
Yeah.
There's usually some new young kids from club from Madison that are non-Madison areas that went to school at Whitewater and they're playing in the tournament. Usually I meet them pretty quick because I know their teammates. So I think just being so involved in volleyball is just the best part about it. That's why I started the game, and started playing it. And then I had kind of the idea of making it expand too, because when I started playing in Madison, there was one club team, and there was one age. And actually, my senior year, it fell through. There weren't enough people, so I had to go to Milwaukee, and I had no options. So then when I got out of school, I was like, hey, let's kind of start this back up. So that's kind of how that really got started a little bit. I think there was a team in between me playing and me coaching that was here for 3 years, and then that fell through. It was like a WVA Nightmares satellite.
Oh, yeah.
So Nightmares actually fell through again up in Appleton. Yeah, so they don't have a team anymore.
That's unfortunate.
Well, somebody else will pick it up.
Yeah.
They'll do something, so.
All right. It sounds pretty good. Sounds like you got out what you kind of wanted to. And then are there club directors? I kind of already asked this, but are they always coaches? I see a lot of them, like you and Mark were both coaching teams. Do you think that happens more often than that, or?
I think with bigger clubs, you usually take on a team because you're going to be at the practices generally anyway, and unless if you kind of keep yourself in the game like that, it's going to be tough to understand how it's changing. It changes every 3 to 4 years. You get it's built on the high school season, I think, where kids are when the rule book too. But just kids coming in and out and just knowing the parents. The hard part is when you're coaching, you can't always focus on the younger people. So I've always wanted to, and I talk to Mark about every year about coaching the young team, so that way you're starting them off with the fundamentals. And usually your director is going to be a coach that's been coaching for a long time, so why not start them off right away and then kind of feed them up the ladder. But he's always said that usually parents don't want to see that. They want 18-year-olds being coached by their oldest coach, or their
coach up there,
or even if they just want the most visible person, because not all parents know what good coaching is. They necessarily will tell you exactly what they think is, but
what their opinion is.
Yes, everyone's got one.
And then do you think being a director as well as coaching that team is better than if you were just a director, just maybe not showing up at all the practices, not seeing the community that's building?
Yeah, I think, being in tune with your players is definitely easier doing both, because then you actually know probably more of the parents, even though you communicate with them a lot. I used to just communicate with my players when they were at that age. I would just say, hey, practices, here's the schedule, give it to your parents, make sure they know it. Yeah. And that way, it gave them a little bit of a responsibility, and they were pretty good at it. There's a couple of kids that I'd always send one of their parents to. But I felt like that, but that gave it kind of a trust to the kids that, and a lot of the parents actually appreciated that they didn't have to always kind of hover over their kids to make sure they're doing everything for them. But I think it made it a little bit easier in that way. But then again, it also, when I'm not sure how it affected it, if a player's parents felt like there was a playing time issue, they knew they were coming to the director to talk to me about it. Yeah. Even though I was their coach, I kind of played multiple roles. So I'm not sure how they felt about that or not. So I never really questioned that.
Maybe now you.
How do you feel about that? So.
All right, last question here. What do you look for when you guys are hiring a new coach or director? We'll start with coach.
3 major things. One is professionalism. Just do they show up on time? Do they respond to communications that you like? Just asking them, hey, like, what are your interests? Like, what did you do in the past? Usually they talk to you right away when they're getting hired, but then a lot of times people are like, okay, well, I'm hired, and they kind of just drop off the face of the earth. So continuously doing that. And then how do they hold themselves in meetings with parents versus players? Like, are they talking about their personal lives a significant amount, which at first is kind of a red flag. I know this with a couple of coaches. It's like, okay, yeah, you might have coached previously to this, but we got to step up our game when we're talking to parents and players. And towards the end of the year, when they're upset about playing time, if you've been talking to them about borderline topics that don't pertain to volleyball, they might use something against you later. Say, hey, like, I didn't like when your coach did this or that. So you just have to kind of check on their their professionalism at first. Usually check social media, make sure that that's in order, because there was once or twice where I found, we need to get this changed before you're officially on our website, so nobody's looking at this. Yeah, that came up.
That's becoming really real.
It is, yeah, and you can't really wipe it completely off the face of the earth either. So I get that, but right now, a lot of people are having more and more issues with that. So they actually parents look at that right away. So, so that communication and then background knowledge of volleyball, that's pretty easy to teach, but it's pretty easy to see that they don't have if you don't get it, to a certain level right away. And again, with the 14s coaches versus 18s, if you're an 18s coach with no knowledge, it's going to be more obvious than a 14. So that's the other reason why sometimes we have to hire younger coaches to do it at the 14s. So yeah.
All right. Well,
those are some things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And good luck in your game tonight.
Thanks, man. I got a